Spring where I live in New England has been really wet and very cold the last few years. And then what happens is it generally gets immediately really hot and humid. And most of this is due to climate change. When I was growing up, the weather was progressively milder coming out of the winter. And then now what happens is things get really drastically hot from being really cool and wet. And still, I really love the outdoors. I love nature, and I get most of my inspiration from nature and the outdoors. I spend a lot of time outside because I have outdoor animals and I live on a small farm. I love caring for my animals, and there's abundant wildlife where I live. All kinds of birds and raptors, hawks and vultures, eagles, foxes, coyotes, bears. I can honestly do without the bears. They really terrify me. And while everything here is green and growing, I still haven't gotten a lot of color in my garden. There are some really beautiful wildflowers starting to come up and grow in my meadow. I have wild phlox, which is a beautiful purple flower, and my irises are just starting to bloom. But on rainy days, I really do refer to my field guides and retreat to my studio to paint. That's all I can really do until later in the summer. So I have quite a collection of field guides, and most of them are very old, vintage ones from, the early part of the 1900s, and I just adore them. They always have such beautiful imagery. And I have a lot of vintage bird guides, wildflower books, and I also collect, the butterfly guides for the UK and the United States, which I really love. They're very, very inspiring, and those keep me going for, most of the year, like during the really bad weather. And I just get so many ideas and inspiration from them. And so I can get painting started just by looking at the beautiful flowers and the beautiful images. So whenever I can find those books at yard sales, thrift shops, or rummage sales at churches, if I can get them for a good price, I always seem to find myself purchasing those, and I use them as a reference a lot in my work. I just really love to paint this way. It's such a meditative process. Just sometimes I'll create, it's almost like a grid abstract where I'll, maybe draw a bird and, or two, and then a bunch of different wildflowers on a page. And then, sometimes I start with a painted background, and sometimes I'll just start with a white page and then paint in a background. I start differently with different projects. And this time I'm starting on the white page. I'm using a color pencil when I'm drawing, just because the color pencil doesn't smudge. As long as you're not using a watercolor pencil, you can use a color pencil. Approaching my sketchbook this way is almost like a mindfulness practice for me. It's very calming and very relaxing. The thing I love most about sketchbook work is that it's art that you create simply for yourself. Of course, you can always decide if you really love something that you've made. You could take it further and develop it into a finished painting. But first, you're creating it in your sketchbook. You're making it just for yourself. And it's time you're setting aside for art time for just yourself. Sketchbook work is time for you to simply enjoy the process of making art. And a lot of us who are really serious about art might begin to sell paintings, or maybe we're teaching others how to paint, and or we're getting together and maybe thinking about going to a painting class with a friend or something, and we're getting a little bit more serious about it. And so you might have some homework to do or something, but this is just our own time to make art and maybe not do a homework project, or, we're doing something just for the sake of enjoying that process of making art. And that's why you originally started making art, was because you really loved the process of it. It takes all the pressure away from having to do something to sell or to market. It's art just for you, to create just for the sake of making something. Setting aside time for your sketchbook practice, it's important for your growth as an artist. You can show up and just, try new things and be really authentic about things you want to experiment with. Try a new style if you wanted to try a new style, or experiment with new materials, or just create what makes you happy. If we can just book out some time every week to work in our sketchbook or art journal, and then see what comes through in these sessions, and follow that intuition, that inner artist intuition, you'll be surprised at how much progress you'll make in your own art style. A lot of times we really need that special time that we give ourselves, just setting that time aside every week just to work on intuitive art, or art we do for ourselves. So in this painting, I'm using acrylic paint. And what I've been doing is I go around the entire page, and I'm putting down color, and I'm working on the different things. And as I go along, now I always consider everything a layer when I'm painting in acrylic. And what I love about acrylic paint, or painting in acrylics, is that if you make a mistake, you can easily go over it. It's kind of really foolproof in that if you don't like something, or you don't like even a whole section of your painting, you could literally gesso over it and just repaint it out. Now, the other thing I love about the fact that it layers so well is that I very often like to create very luminous layers. So I will put down a layer of color sometimes, and I will draw on top of the first layer of color, and then add a second layer and it will become the background color. In this one, I'm painting a background around all these images that I put down as I go along, and then I do put down another background over this, and I love that just as much. I will add more color as I go along on all these images if I feel like they need more color, or I will build up layers of color, and I'm mixing the colors on, off to the left there. I'm mixing all these colors on a little piece of paper palette that I'm just putting together. Sometimes I use shiny magazine paper just to mix my colors on. It's almost like buying that palette paper, only it's a lot cheaper to use old magazines that I'm recycling as I go along, because sometimes I'll just use those for mixed media papers later because they have all the paint on them and stuff, and they're really fun to use for collage after they've been my palette paper. And, I just go along and I mix as I go, and it's really kind of fun for me. And, yeah, that's what I'm just kind of going along and doing my thing. But all that stuff that I'm putting down there, I drew first in colored pencil. And after I draw it, I'm going to be putting that same pale pink background on this area. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, as I do appreciate it so very much. Thanks for being here, and please come again soon.